I'm a 30-year-old guy, and for as long as I can remember, my family has been my priority. Growing up, money was always tight. My parents worked multiple jobs to keep a roof over our heads, but we still struggled to make ends meet. I have vivid memories of lights being cut off, scrapping together meals, and watching my parents worry about how they'd pay the rent. Those tough years shaped me, and when I finally landed a successful career in my mid-20s, I made it my mission to give back. At first, it felt good, like I was finally repaying them for all the sacrifices they made. It started with small things, paying off a few overdue bills, covering my younger siblings' school fees, and helping my parents with groceries. But as my career grew, so did the requests. Suddenly, I wasn't just paying for necessities. There were demands for tuition, luxury vacations, new gadgets, and even home renovations. My younger sister, now 25, got into the habit of asking for expensive things, designer bags, electronics, and a car that I eventually paid for. My 22-year-old brother would casually mention needing money to stay afloat at college, which I later found out meant funding his partying lifestyle. A year ago, I realized I was nearing my breaking point. My bank statements looked more like a family expense report. I sat down and did the math. In the past 5 years, I had spent more on my family than I'd saved for myself. I hadn't even started seriously investing for my own future or my upcoming wedding. It wasn't just about the money anymore, it was the entitlement. My family acted like this was my duty, like I owed them everything because they raised me. When I told them I needed to set boundaries, things exploded. My parents accused me of forgetting where I came from, and my siblings piled on. They guilted me about how much they'd sacrificed to support my dreams when I was younger. It didn't matter that I had already repaid them tenfold. The final straw came a few months ago when my sister wrecked the car I'd bought her and immediately demanded I buy her another one. She didn't ask, didn't apologize, just demanded it, as if it was her right. I refused. That's when the real drama began. I called a family meeting to explain that I was done being their personal ATM. I laid it all out, the stress, the resentment, and how this was impacting my mental health. My fiancé, who had been urging me to stand up for myself, joined me for moral support. I went in hoping for understanding, but instead I was met with yelling, accusations, and guilt tripping. My dad said I was turning my back on the family, and my mom started crying about how they'd always been there for me. My siblings chimed in, calling me selfish and accusing me of abandoning them when they needed me most. After that meeting, the real fallout began. My family started spreading stories to anyone who would listen. Suddenly, I was the ungrateful son who made millions and left his struggling family in the dust. They posted vague, dramatic updates on social media about being betrayed by someone you love. Extended family members started messaging me asking why I wasn't helping out anymore. Even at work, a coworker awkwardly mentioned seeing a post from my sister about how money changes people. I felt humiliated and betrayed. My therapist encouraged me to stand firm, reminding me that my family's reaction was more about their dependency than any wrongdoing on my part. My fiancée was my rock through all this. She even suggested that maybe I needed to go public with my side of the story, not as revenge, but as a way to regain control. The final blow came when my family issued an ultimatum, publicly apologize for abandoning them or be cut off entirely. I couldn't believe it. After everything I'd done, they were threatening to disown me unless I caved. That's when I decided enough was enough. For the past week, I've been weighing my options. I've gone over every conversation, every transaction, every time I sacrifice my own goals for theirs. And I've come to one conclusion: it's time to take control of the narrative. Tomorrow, I'm posting my side of the story. Not out of spite, but because I deserve to be heard. I'll be laying it all out: the years of support, the sacrifices, the entitlement, and how this has affected me. It's not about burning bridges, but about making it clear that I won't be manipulated anymore. I posted a cryptic message on my social media earlier. I'll address everything tomorrow. Stay tuned. It's already getting attention, with people messaging me to ask what's going on. I'm nervous, but I'm ready. They wanted an apology? Well, they're about to get one, just not the kind they're expecting. Update 1. The next morning, I sat down at my desk, staring at the drafted post on my screen. It was all there, everything I'd been holding back for years. I wasn't sure how people would react, but at that point, I knew it didn't matter. This was my truth, and it needed to be said. With a deep breath, I hit post and tagged each member of my immediate family. The post started on a positive note. I thanked my parents for everything they'd done during my childhood. I talked about how their hard work and sacrifices inspired me to strive for success. Then I transitioned into listing, in exact detail, the financial support I had provided over the years. Tuition for my siblings, mortgage payments, a down payment on a car, luxury vacations they insisted were family bonding, even the times I bailed them out when unexpected expenses came up. I itemized it all, making it clear just how much I had contributed. From there, I explained why I had to stop. I talked about how their endless demands were draining me emotionally and financially. I shared how I'd spent years prioritizing their needs over my own, only to be met with more entitlement and guilt tripping. I clarified that this wasn't about being ungrateful, but about protecting my mental health and building a future for myself. I emphasized that I wasn't cutting them off out of spite, but out of necessity. The post was live for less than 5 minutes before the comments started rolling in. My younger sister was the first to react, accusing me of humiliating her and the rest of the family. She called me selfish and claimed I was exaggerating. My brother chimed in next, calling me a liar and saying I was using money as a weapon. My parents didn't comment publicly, but the family group chat exploded within the hour. Message after message came through, each one angrier than the last. They accused me of airing dirty laundry and betraying the family. While the group chat was imploding, something unexpected happened. Friends, colleagues, and even distant acquaintances began commenting on my post. A few of my closest friends defended me outright, pointing out how unreasonable my family's demands had been. Some shared their own stories of setting boundaries with entitled relatives, which seemed to resonate with others reading along. The post started getting shared, first by people I knew and then by strangers. Within hours, it had gone semi-viral. Amid the chaos, my fiancée left a thoughtful comment under the post. She didn't take sides directly, but reminded everyone that boundaries are an act of self-care and not a rejection of love. Her words seemed to diffuse some of the tension in the comments, though it didn't stop the messages flooding my phone. My parents called me repeatedly, demanding I take the post down. They claimed I was ruining the family's reputation and making them look bad. I refused. For years, I had been made to feel like I owed them everything, and this was my chance to finally stand up for myself. By midday, extended family members started reaching out. A few uncles and aunts messaged me privately to express their support, saying they'd always wondered how I managed to handle so much responsibility. Others weren't as kind. My mom's sister in particular called me out publicly, accusing me of being heartless and abandoning the people who raised me. It was a mix of support and criticism, but what surprised me most were the messages from strangers. People I didn't even know were commenting, thanking me for sharing my story. Many of them talked about how they'd been through similar experiences and how they wished they had the courage to stand up to their own families. As the day went on, the post gained more traction. I received direct messages from people who wanted to know more, some even asking for advice. It was overwhelming but also validating. For years, I'd felt like I was the bad guy for wanting to set boundaries, but now I realized how common this issue really was. That evening, I sat down with my fiancée to decompress. She told me how proud she was of me for standing my ground, even when it meant facing backlash. Seeing the post go viral was nerve-wracking, but I didn't regret it. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own narrative. Before going to bed, I checked the post one last time. It had gained thousands of reactions, shares, and comments. I added a final update to the post, thanking everyone for their support and emphasizing that I wasn't looking for sympathy, just understanding. I ended with a note that if my family couldn't respect my boundaries, I would have to consider cutting contact entirely. It was a tough decision to make, but I knew it was the right one. Now, it's up to them to decide whether they want to rebuild the relationship on healthier terms or let it fall apart completely. For the first time in years, I'm ready to move forward on my terms. Update 2. The day after my post gained traction, I noticed something odd. My younger sister had made her social media accounts public, which was unusual for her. It didn't take long to figure out why. She had posted a lengthy rebuttal, tagging several extended family members and a few mutual friends. Her post painted herself as the victim of my cold-hearted abandonment. She claimed I had promised to support her no matter what, and that I was now breaking that promise over petty disagreements. She included carefully selected anecdotes about her struggles, conveniently leaving out the car I paid for, her designer shopping sprees, and her habit of expecting money without explanation. The post blew up within our family circle, with relatives weighing in. Some commented to show support for her, while others simply shared her post, spreading it further. By midday, my phone was inundated with messages. Aunts and uncles, most of whom I hadn't spoken to in years, were suddenly eager to share their opinions. Some were polite, asking me to reconsider my decision for the sake of keeping the family together. Others were more forceful, accusing me of being ungrateful and selfish. Among the more alarming developments were the anonymous messages I began receiving. At first, I thought they were from random trolls who had stumbled upon my story, but the tone felt personal. The messages hinted at things only my immediate family would know, accusing me of being a failure and threatening to expose secrets about me. It wasn't hard to connect the dots. Someone in the family was behind it. Then things escalated further. I was called into an unexpected meeting with HR at work. My manager informed me that someone had sent an email to my company, claiming I was unstable and suggesting I shouldn't be trusted in a professional environment. Thankfully, my company had my back. The email was vague and unsubstantiated, and HR quickly dismissed it as a malicious attempt to damage my reputation. Still, it was a wake-up call. My family was willing to cross boundaries I hadn't even considered. That evening, I spoke with my therapist about everything that had happened. She helped me unpack how deeply my family's manipulation had influenced me over the years. She pointed out patterns I hadn't noticed before, like how they used public shaming and emotional blackmail to control me. The conversation wasn't easy, but it gave me clarity. Meanwhile, my post continued to gain traction online. Someone had shared it on Reddit, where it found its way to a thread about toxic family dynamics. The comments were filled with people sharing similar stories of entitled relatives and impossible expectations. Many of them voiced support, calling me brave for standing up to my family. Some even offered advice on how to protect myself moving forward. Amid all this, another bombshell dropped. My younger brother's financial troubles came to light. A family member who had privately supported me revealed that my brother was drowning in debt. Apparently, he had taken out loans and maxed out credit cards to fund a gambling habit. When the family tried to confront him, he deflected, blaming me for refusing to help him out. It was absurd. Not only was his debt his own doing, but I'd already helped him countless times in the past. As the days went on, I noticed a divide forming within the family. A few relatives reached out privately to say they understood my perspective, but they were hesitant to say so publicly for fear of backlash. Others doubled down, siding with my parents and siblings and continuing to badmouth me in group chats and on social media. I realized I needed to create some distance. I blocked my siblings and parents on all platforms, cutting off the constant stream of negativity. It wasn't an easy decision, but it brought an immediate sense of relief. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. Still, I knew I couldn't rely on boundaries alone. I consulted a lawyer to explore my options for protecting myself from further retaliation. The lawyer confirmed that the anonymous messages and the email to my employer could constitute harassment if they continued. They advised me to document everything and consider taking legal action if necessary. Throughout all of this, my fiancée and her family were incredibly supportive. Her parents, in particular, were a source of encouragement. They commended me for standing up for myself and even offered to help if I needed additional support. Their kindness was a stark contrast to the chaos on my side of the family. To take my mind off the drama, I began focusing on wedding planning and hobbies I'd neglected for years. It felt strange but liberating to redirect my energy toward things that brought me joy instead of constantly worrying about my family's needs. Before ending the week, I posted a brief update on social media. I thanked everyone for their support and shared that I was taking steps to protect myself from further harassment. I ended the post with a cryptic teaser, hinting that I had discovered something major about my family's behavior that I would address soon. The truth was, I had uncovered something that could change everything, but I wasn't ready to share it just yet. Update 3. A few days after my last post, I received a private message from a distant relative. We'd never been close, so I was surprised to hear from them. The message was brief but unsettling. You should look into where your money's been going. Not everything is as it seems. They didn't elaborate, but it was enough to set me on edge. Curiosity turned into action, and I spent the next few days digging through years of old bank statements and receipts. At first, everything seemed normal. Then I noticed discrepancies, large withdrawals, unexplained transfers, and odd payments to businesses I didn't recognize. The more I looked, the clearer it became my family had been misusing the money I gave them. The first bombshell came when I cross-referenced a hefty payment I'd made to help cover my parents' mortgage. Instead of going to their mortgage company, a significant portion had been used to buy a timeshare in Florida. I didn't even know they had a timeshare. A quick search confirmed it. Not only had they been using my money for it, but they'd also taken multiple vacations there over the years, trips I was never invited to join. Things only got worse from there. My younger sister, who I thought was using the money I gave her for college tuition, had been spending thousands on designer handbags, jewelry, and luxury clothes. She'd even posted pictures online showing off her purchases, captioning them with phrases like "treat yourself." Then came my brother's financial disaster. The same relative who tipped me off shared that my brother's massive debt wasn't just from poor budgeting, it was tied to a gambling problem. I confirmed this by digging through the financial records he had casually shared with me in the past. There were multiple cash withdrawals at casinos and payments to online gambling sites. I was furious. I had spent years sacrificing my own goals to support them, and they were living it up behind my back. I drafted a long email outlining everything I discovered. I included the timeshare, the luxury purchases, the gambling debts, everything. I sent it to my parents and siblings, demanding an explanation. The responses were predictably defensive. My parents insisted they had earned the right to enjoy life after everything they'd done for me. My sister admitted to using the money frivolously but brushed it off, claiming she thought I wouldn't care, because I have so much. My brother lashed out, blaming me for abandoning him and saying I should have been more involved in his life. It was excuse after excuse, with no accountability from any of them. At that point, I decided enough was enough. I posted a follow-up on social media, carefully laying out the details of the financial misuse without naming names. I explained how the money I had provided for education, housing, and emergencies had been squandered on luxuries, gambling, and vacations. The reaction was immediate. My friends and extended family flooded the comments. Some were shocked and disgusted by my family's actions, while others expressed sympathy, sharing their own experiences with relatives who had taken advantage of them. The post quickly went viral again, drawing support from strangers who said it was a wake-up call about the importance of setting boundaries. The backlash against my family started almost immediately. Friends and relatives began calling them out directly, questioning their actions and demanding accountability. My mom called me in tears, begging me to stop humiliating the family. She claimed I was ruining everything and that she was getting non-stop messages from people criticizing her. I wasn't moved. If they had been honest from the start, none of this would have happened. I consulted my lawyer again, who advised me to send cease and desist letters to my family for the defamatory social media posts they had been making about me. It was a necessary step to protect myself from further damage. As the dust settled, I reflected on everything during a session with my therapist. She helped me see how long I had been carrying the weight of their manipulations and how freeing it was to finally confront the truth. It wasn't easy, but uncovering their betrayal helped me process years of resentment I hadn't even realized I was holding on to. To wrap things up, I posted another update online thanking everyone for their support and sharing how these revelations had pushed me to take control of my life. But I ended the post with a teaser. There was one more shocking discovery about my parents' finances that I wasn't ready to reveal yet. I knew it would send shockwaves through the family when it came out, but for now I needed time to prepare. The next step would be the biggest yet, and I wasn't backing down. Update 4. A week after my last post, I received a letter in the mail that left me stunned. It was from the bank, a formal notice about a delinquent payment on a second mortgage taken out on my parents' house. The problem? My name was listed as a cosigner. I had no knowledge of this mortgage, let alone agreed to cosign it. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake, but after contacting the bank, the truth came out. My parents had used my information to secure the loan. They'd forged my signature and listed me as a cosigner without ever telling me. The loan was for a significant amount, and they'd already missed several payments. I immediately called my lawyer, who confirmed that this was a clear case of fraud. The forgery alone was a serious legal issue, but the implications of the missed payments could damage my credit and financial stability. My lawyer advised me to take action immediately, and while the idea of suing my own parents felt surreal, I knew I had no choice. When I confronted my parents, they didn't deny it. Instead, they justified it by saying they did it for the family. They claimed they'd always planned to pay it back and never intended for me to find out. My dad insisted it was the only way to keep the house afloat, but I knew that wasn't true. Between the timeshare in Florida and the other frivolous expenses, it was clear they weren't just using the money for necessities. I gave them an ultimatum. They had to resolve the debt immediately and remove my name from the mortgage, or I'd be forced to take legal action. They pleaded with me to handle things privately, promising to fix it on their own. But after years of lies and betrayal, I wasn't about to take their word for it. My fiancée was furious when I told her what had happened. She couldn't believe the lengths my family had gone to in their manipulation, but instead of letting her anger spiral, she channeled it into helping me focus. She reminded me that we were a team, and that no matter what happened, we'd get through it together. As news of the fraudulent mortgage spread within the family, the divide grew deeper. Some relatives supported me, saying it was unforgivable for my parents to jeopardize my financial future. Others accused me of being heartless, claiming I was blowing things out of proportion and should be willing to forgive my parents. The public fallout continued when I posted a vague update on social media. I didn't name names or share specific details, but I hinted at the fraudulent mortgage and emphasized the importance of protecting one's financial independence. The post quickly went viral, with people flooding the comments to share similar stories of family members misusing their trust. It even caught the attention of a few media outlets, who reached out for interviews. My parents were livid. They called me repeatedly, begging me to stop airing the family's dirty laundry. They accused me of dragging their name through the mud and claimed I was ruining their reputation. I reminded them that they'd been publicly shaming me for months, and this was simply me standing up for myself. Within days, I officially filed a lawsuit against my parents to remove my name from the mortgage. My lawyer assured me this was the right move, not just to protect myself, but to set a precedent that this kind of behavior wouldn't be tolerated. At the same time, I froze all my financial accounts and assets to prevent any further misuse by anyone. My support system was my saving grace during this time. My fiancée, her family, and my closest friends rallied around me, offering emotional and practical help. They reminded me that this wasn't about punishing my parents, but about reclaiming control of my life. Through therapy, I began to realize just how deeply my family's manipulation had affected me. For years, I'd put their needs ahead of my own, sacrificing my own goals and well-being to meet their endless demands. For the first time, I was taking full control of my life, and it felt like a turning point. The online community continued to show overwhelming support. Strangers shared stories of similar betrayals, thanking me for being open about my experience. It was both heartbreaking and comforting to know I wasn't alone in dealing with this kind of family dysfunction. The story took another twist when I learned my parents had hired a lawyer to fight back against my claims. It was an aggressive move, one that set the stage for a courtroom showdown. While part of me was shocked, another part wasn't surprised. This was just another attempt to deflect responsibility and avoid accountability. As I prepared for the legal battle ahead, I knew this was far from over. The next step would be crucial, not just for resolving the mortgage issue, but for finally breaking free from the cycle of manipulation and control. The stakes were higher than ever, but I was ready to face whatever came next. Update 5. The legal battle began quickly after my parents filed their response, claiming I had given them verbal permission to use my name on the second mortgage. They doubled down, insisting it was a misunderstanding and that they had no intention of defrauding me. Their lawyer leaned hard into the narrative that this was a family matter blown out of proportion, likely hoping to frame me as the unreasonable party. My lawyer, however, was thorough. We compiled everything, emails, texts, and any documentation showing my parents had acted without my consent. This included proof of the forged signature, which was undeniable once matched against my actual handwriting. We also highlighted their history of financial manipulation, showcasing the pattern of entitlement and deceit. The courtroom was tense when the hearing finally arrived. My parents sat at their table looking weary but defiant. When it was their turn to speak, they didn't hold back. They recounted their sacrifices during my childhood, framed their actions as desperate measures to save the family home, and even shed tears, claiming they never meant to hurt me. The judge remained neutral, but it was clear the emotional appeal wouldn't carry much weight without solid evidence to back it up. When my lawyer presented our case, the tone shifted. The forged documents were undeniable, and the timeline of events painted a clear picture of intentional deception. The judge asked pointed questions, and my parents' explanations grew shakier with each response. By the end of the hearing, it was obvious where things were headed. The ruling came swiftly. The judge found in my favor, declaring the mortgage fraudulent and ordering my name to be removed. My parents were held solely responsible for the remaining debt. It was a decisive victory, but the fallout was immediate. As we left the courtroom, my parents and siblings confronted me, accusing me of ruining their lives. They claimed I'd humiliated them, destroyed their reputation, and abandoned my family when they needed me most. I didn't engage. For years, I'd let their words cut me down, but this time I walked away. Their reaction was just another attempt to shift blame and avoid accountability. Back home, I updated my online followers. I shared the outcome of the case and thanked everyone who had supported me throughout the ordeal. The response was overwhelming. Strangers from around the world commented with words of encouragement, celebrating my decision to stand up for myself. Many shared their own stories of family betrayal, reinforcing how common and painful these situations can be. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of relief. My name was cleared, and I was no longer tied to their financial mess. The weight I'd been carrying for so long was finally lifted. In therapy, I reflected on how far I'd come. Setting boundaries hadn't been easy, but it was necessary for my well-being. I was finally free to prioritize my own happiness without guilt or fear of retaliation. With the legal battle behind me, I shifted my focus back to my future. Wedding planning with my fiancée became a source of joy and excitement, something I could fully invest in now that the family drama was behind me. We chose a small, intimate ceremony, intentionally keeping the guest list limited to people who genuinely supported us. Before moving forward completely, I sent one final message to my parents. I made it clear that I wouldn't have any further contact with them unless they sought therapy and took accountability for their actions. I didn't expect them to respond or change, but it was important to set that boundary. My siblings attempted to reconnect shortly after the court ruling, claiming they wanted to move past everything. While I appreciated their attempts, I kept my distance. Their role in the situation had been clear, and I wasn't ready to let them back into my life without seeing genuine change. As life began to settle, I found myself drawn to helping others navigate similar challenges. I started a blog, sharing my experiences with toxic family dynamics and the steps I took to break free. The response was incredible. People reached out, thanking me for putting into words what they had been through and offering advice they could apply to their own lives. I ended my final post with a message that encapsulated everything I'd learned through this journey. Sometimes you have to choose yourself, even when it means leaving those you love behind. It's not selfish, it's survival. Looking ahead, I feel hopeful. My fiancé and I are building a life filled with love, trust, and mutual respect. The scars from this experience will always be there, but they're a reminder of the strength it took to stand up for myself. My story might have started with betrayal, but it ends with freedom, and that's all I could have ever hoped for.